So I will propose to start to save your time also because I presume you're exhausted already from the discussions in the previous period. So I will be sharing my screen and I hope that you can see it now clearly. So tonight or today in USA, we're going to discuss about the novelties that Horizon Europe, the biggest program for the research and innovation from European Union, is going to bring in this period in 2001-2007. So just give me 1 minute to present myself. My background is in information technologies, and I work at the University Clinical Center of Republic of Srpska as an expert to research center, and also as a professor at Pan-European University Apeiron in Banja Luka, and have long experience with the EU-funded program since 1996. And I'm also related to the EURAXESS network since 2010 when I established EURAXESS Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then last year I organized EURAXESS Africa as a task of the EURAXESS worldwide. Also, I was a couple of years engaged by the European Commission through the contractors as an expert and trainer in Southeast Asia and Africa. So let me not praise myself more, but about the Horizon Europe, I already published 2 books. One is in the Serbian language, and it's produced in 2021. And at the beginning of this year, in alliance or with the support of the Regional Cooperation Council, we issued 1 book that was related to the national contact points in Western Balkans, about a brief guide of Horizon Europe and how the national contact points, persons that are in charge to assist the researchers in applying to the Horizon Europe grants, how they should collaborate with the partners in this. Let me tell just briefly, very fast and very few words about the North American countries' participation in Horizon 2020, which is previous program. For example, USA had 1,561 grant agreements signed with the net contribution from the European Union in amount of 128.8 million of euros. And they were really in a line with the overall success rate of the Horizon Europe with the 17.86%. 12 principal investigators in the European Research Council were participating, and also 9 EAC participation. If we look at the thematic areas of the participation in the program, the most candidates were interested in the Marie Skłodowska key reactions in the researchers' mobility with 1,400 mobilities. And then we have these five other topics like health, ERC, smart green and integrated transport, advanced materials, and research infrastructures. Similar to this is also Canada. Of course, Canada is a smaller country compared to USA with a number of researchers, and therefore the figures are also less than in USA, but still the success rate is almost the same. It's even bigger, 18.14%, which is above the average success rate in the Horizon Europe, with 16.18 million euros of net EU contribution and something less than 400 grant agreements signed. Also, normally, due to the constraints of the program, MSCA is a most popular program with the 240 researchers participating, and also more or less the same topics were interested for the Canadian researchers as for the USA researchers. So what are the main novelties? I will try to combine into the 6 groups, starting with some slight changes in the program structure and some novelties in the program structure. Novelty for the European Innovation Council, especially the EU missions and partnerships, participation rules that are more focused now on internationalization, open science issues, and the changes in the most popular program, which is MSCA. So let me start with this program structure, which is more or less the same 3-pillar structure, except the change is that the former 3rd pillar, which were the societal challenges, they now become global challenges, and European industrial competitiveness moved to pillar 2. And you see that in this pillar 2, we have something that is called clusters. These are the formal societal challenges, but now they are called clusters because of the the terminology that was adopted for the Horizon Europe program. The clusters itself, they are organized around these important topics. And also within this second pillar, there is a joint research center, which is also one very important agency within the European Commission. Pillar 1 has left the same, but here we added something else. Here is associated program is Euratom and European Defense Fund. So this is more or less the same structure. And the novelty is also that the spreading excellence and widening participation is slightly changed into the widening participation and strengthening of the European research area. So I'm very pleased to say that Canada has concluded the exploratory talks with the European Commission regarding the association status. So I'm congrats to Canada to be become an associated country, and very happy for this, because then the many doors are open for the Canadian researchers. The second novelty is very interesting, and it's related mostly to the European SMEs, but also the participation of the SMEs from the third countries is also initiated, and it's possible. And here we are talking about the several different funding schemes. The first one is EIC, or European Innovation Council Pathfinder, for the grants value of 3 to 4 million euros. This is something like we had in a previous program, like future and emerging technologies, to explore new breakthrough technologies with a low level of technology readiness level. And in this case, the calls that are going to be published, they are going to be listed in the two directions. One is a bottom-up approach for the collaborative projects with the TRL 1 to 3, and the top-down projects that can be collaborative but also individual projects with TLR 2 to 4. So you see, this is something that is a breakthrough technology, and we just need to identify this. In order to develop this, the researchers can use EIC transition with the grant amounts up to 2.5 million in order to develop this idea. So it's maturation and validation of the novel technology in the lab, so prototyping, development of the business cases, and the different commercialization steps towards the TLR 5 and 6, and also the business models for validation and the business plan for development to the market. So after you develop this, the Commission is also offering EIC Accelerator, which is a former SME instrument in the Horizon 2020 program, with the grants that can be up to 2.5 million, but also the investments up to the 15 million euros. So as a former SME instruments, most of you are already, I hope, familiar with the SME instrument, what it was the purpose. So it was primarily to develop the technologies and the products for the commercialization. So here we expect the higher level of the technology readiness, between 5 and 6 at the beginning and even 8 at the end of the project. And mostly it is going to be individual fundings with a transition that can be set up depending on the successfulness of the previous EIC Pathfinder or ERC grants that the researcher was awarded. So this, shall we say that this is now more structured and also encompassed with the EIT ecosystem. So now this third pillar with the European Innovation Council on the top is something that is very important for the advancement of the industrial sector. A very big novelty and something that is crucial in the Horizon Europe is the research and innovation missions. This is a tool, or this is a kind of instrument with which Commission wants to resolve some burning issues related to the five topics. First one, climate change, including societal transformation, then the cancer, soil health and food, climate neutral and smart cities, healthy oceans, seas, coastal and inland waters. So these are the 5 burning topics for not only for the European Union, but also for the other continents in our planet. So here you can see that, for example, for cancer, the intention of the Commission is by 2030 to have more than 3 million lives saved with the different research and breakthroughs in research related to the cancer cure, the cure, and also the treatment after the disease itself. Also, there is some deal with the climate disruptions to accelerate the transitions to save the planet, like we like to say here, and to resilience some transformations in society that are observed recently. Healthy oceans, seas, and coastal and inland waters means let's protect our waters, because the waters are the form of life that we originate. So we will try to, with these projects, to restore the degraded ecosystems and habitats, to bring the contribution to the zero carbon industry and economy, or blue economy in the case of marines, and also to harness the essential goods and services that these ecosystems are providing. For the climate and neutral and smart cities, it is expected to promote and showcase 100 European cities with their systemic transformation towards climate neutrality and even zero production of the gases, of the climate gases. And also for the health and the food and the soil, it is expected that at least 75% of all soils in the EU are going to be ready to produce healthy food, give the healthy to the people, and to preserve the nature and climate by using the favorable agricultural and soil technologies. The next one is also in the frame of these missions are the partnerships. The partnerships are continuing. We had them in the Horizon 2020, but now in a different form. There are only 3 types of the partnerships in the Horizon Europe. The co-programmed partnerships that are mostly based on the Memorandum of Understanding between the European Commission and the private or public partners. And these kind of partnerships are going to be fully funded by the Horizon Europe program in the form of research innovation actions, or collaboration and supportive actions. Another form, which is combining former joint undertakings and Article 185 initiatives, are the institutional partnerships, which are now combined together. And these are partnerships where the implementation of the topics is not covered by the other parts of the Horizon Europe program, or include such kind of partnerships that will not achieve objectives if they are implemented in the regular calls for proposals. And the example of this are something that we had also in the Horizon 2020 as a pilot, and later on in a later stage as a already settled instruments. It's the EIT, or European Innovation Technology, Knowledge and Innovation Communities. So these are kind of communities that are what we could heard in a past presentation or in a past discussion about these regional collaboration issues. So with these innovation communities, you can organize a regional collaboration that is supported with these two important instruments. And the third one, it's grant-based co-funded partnerships between the European Union countries, where the researchers and founders are public authorities at the core, and they are giving the national agencies that can be involved also in the projects in order to resolve against some problems that can be supported. Something that we had previously, like ERANET co-fund program. Now this is something that we take under these co-funded partnerships. At the moment, there are 49 foreseen different partnerships. 17 of them are co-funded. 20 of them are institutional partnerships, of which 9 are KICs, and then 12 co-programmed partnerships. More details on partnerships, and you can find it on the website of the European Commission. So I'm not going to take more time, because I would like to discuss more about these novelties with you. So focus of the participation is moving towards the internationalization and safety. So a number of the different initiatives are undertaken in order to have more associated countries than in previous program. The example of this is recent talks with Israel and with Canada. So let's hope that this number of associated countries will be more than 16 that was in a previous program. Then there are going to be more increased number of calls and topics that are involving the third countries. With one remark that the participation of the third countries, but not industrialized third countries like USA and Canada, can be more or less in all calls, but under the really justified reasons and explanation why the participation of the third country is crucial for achieving the objectives and the benefits of the calls. So instead of former guarantee fund, now we have mutual insurance mechanism. Now this mechanism is covering between 5 and 8% of the grant. It is going to be defined by case-to-case basis and will be defined in the grant preparation phase, deducted from the pre-financing and returned after the approval of the final report, like a last installment, like it was the case in a Horizon 2020. The issue is that the focus is also switched from the excellence to the impact. So now all the actions are expected to provide the impacts, or what we would like to say is cost effectiveness. Let's see what this money can give as a benefit, so that we have more benefits than it really costs. And therefore there are new terms like destinations, which are describing the expected impacts of the different strategies in the European Union, and also the topics which are more narrow and related to the expected outcomes, essentials to have for having these impacts in the destinations. Security appraisal procedure is something that is introduced also, respecting the recent legislation of the Union and national laws for protection of information introduced in the model grant agreement, and also related to this do not significant harm principle, which is introduced in the European Green Deal and other relevant strategies. But this is something that the Commission is intending let's try to focus our research on something that is not going to harm our planet and our appearance on this planet. So our living in general. So it's included also in the clusters, in the work programs of the clusters, having importance on the environmental outcomes and impacts from their activities. As the Horizon Europe is the funding mechanism that is done and collected by or is funded by the taxpayers' money. So it is expected also that the results of these activities are publicly open to the researchers, so that the researchers can continue to develop the ideas and continue to contribute in a positive direction to these achievements. So open access publication now is mandatory, but still it's possible to select between the gold and green access. But what is also necessary is introduction of this generation of fair and open data. Fair means findable, accessible, interoperable, and usable. This is under the motto of the Commission to be as open as possible, but as close as necessary. So it's not necessary to disclose all the information that can be maybe vital of some security interests or different kind of interests. So it's very understanding that some of the data that are going to be presented still will be protected by the IPRs and the other regulations. For this purpose, the European Commission has created European Open Science Cloud. You have the link below, and the presentation will be available by the organizers. Sorry, Ona, do you hear me, and can you see the presentation, because I was kicked off from the...
Yeah, I think they had some a little bit of technical issues. I don't see the presentation, but I do see you.
Okay. Okay, I will share it again.
Sounds good.
And,
now I think it's...
Shall I... Yes, from this level.
Yeah, I can see everything now.
What you suggest?
Yeah, I think you can just continue from here. That's fine.
So I can continue with this?
Yeah.
Okay, so I said that the open access is ultimate now. And for this purpose, to facilitate the researchers with the open access, the Commission has opened 2 portals. The one portal is European Open Science Cloud, created to share these research results with more than 150 member institutions. And you have the links here, and this presentation is going to be shared, so you will be able to click on the link and open the portal. And the other one is the Open Research Europe portal with the open access publishing platform to host beneficiaries' publications. So for the purposes of the open access, you can, and open science, of course, you can use these two portals, but you are also allowed to use other publicly open portals to publish the results of your project. So the next thing that I'm going to speak about is the MSCA changes. We have some slight nomenclature changes. So former ITN, Innovative Training Networks, are now doctoral networks. There is only one type of the doctoral network, industrial or joint doctorate. You can switch between these two, or you can combine them even. Every student must be enrolled in the PhD program at the time of the announcement of the call for the positions. And the project can have a maximum 360 research months, which is equivalent of the 10 PhD students per project, except for the industrial doctorates, where it can be increased for additional 180 researchers months, in total of 540 researchers months. Postdoctoral fellowships are something what was formerly individual fellowships. Again, it's a one type, it's European fellowship and the global fellowship, with no panel for the career integration and in this career restart panel. And the novelty is something that was piloted also in Horizon 2020. Those are the ERA fellowships, European Research Area fellowships. These are the fellowships when the researcher is going to the a widening country. By the definition of the Commission, widening country are those countries that are underperforming in the compared to the average success of the European countries. So if your host institution is in the widening countries and you are not successful in the European fellowship, you can opt in for the ERA fellowship, but this is the only condition that your host institution is in the widening country. Another novelty in the postdoctoral fellowship is that if you are up to 8 years of PhD, from the PhD, you are eligible. But if you are 8 years or more, you are not eligible for the individual fellowships anymore. You have to go to the European Research Council or other parts of the program to apply for your research. So now this is the novelty that is shrinking the number of participants that are having more than 8 years experience from the PhD. The staff exchange scheme is formally known as a research and innovation staff exchange. It's still interdisciplinary consortia with a single from the single sector, and with the main aim to promote I3, a collaboration approach, international, interdisciplinary, and intersectoral, which is also the case in the doctoral networks. There is some specialty in this program that is to be changed. Co-fund has been the same as previously, and the only thing that is new is the promotion of new institutions' participation, because it was observed that some institutions are using far more frequently this co-funding program than the other institutions. Now the Commission wants to introduce new institutions in this scheme. And now just change of the name, MSCA and Citizens instead of the Researchers' Night. No changes. It's a promotional activity organized in the European countries, where unfortunately the researchers from the third countries are participating just as guests. So this was, I was trying to be as fast as possible to go through these changes in the program and some novelties. Normally, if you have the questions, I will be more than happy to give you the answers now. What I know at the moment, because the program is alive, program is changing, the program is developing, and the main motto of this program is evolution, not revolution. So not many things have been changed. I was based this presentation on the general rules of participation. I didn't go in details about the financial rules, for example, and for the implementation rules and, for example, evaluation rules, where now the participants will be able to influence the final results of the evaluation, not final, but the individual evaluation reports from the evaluators. And then after that, there will be the consensus report created. This is the biggest novelty in the evaluation process. There are some other minor novelties about the remote evaluation and such things, but now I'm open for any question.
Yeah, I think we have one.
Thanks very much, Carmen, and great to work with you across the Atlantic. So I'm Martin Penny. I'm the head of unit for international cooperation policy in the part of the Commission, European Commission, that deals with research innovation. We call them the Directorate Generals. And my unit deals with our cooperation with the Americas, but also with Australia, New Zealand, Russia, and Central Asia as well. So this session is on scientific openness and international collaboration in times of conflict. And really, I want this to be as an open a session as possible and hear from your views, hear from you all your views on this issue. You know, on questions like, should all scientific research be unconditionally open? How should or could this change in times of crisis or emergencies, such as the ones we're living through right now in the COVID pandemic? Should there be different conditions for this openness in times of conflict, such as the one we're living through right now with the war in Ukraine? And this session will touch on these issues and any other issues that you may want to raise. But to maybe give some food for thought for your questions, let me give you some reflections from my side on these issues. Within the European Commission, you heard from our Director General at the start of the session this morning. The openness of our funding to international cooperation is really a cornerstone of our funding programs. We call our funding programs the framework programs, as you've heard. The current one, Horizon Europe, is designed to be open to researchers of any nationality and to legal entities from any type of organization in all countries of the world. And of course, this allows for the best minds from across the world to come together and find imaginative, creative, and effective solutions to the challenges we all face in the world. You know, in particular, the green challenges, climate and environmental challenges, which we talked about in the last session, digital challenges, health challenges, innovation challenges, and then through that find solutions that change our lives, our environments, our societies, and the world we live in. We continue to see the importance of this global cooperation in relation to the COVID pandemic, in sharing data, new ideas, new approaches for vaccines, medical care, and treatment, and so on. And we see it in many of the other areas. We talked about in the last session, you know, the importance of pre-normative research for informing standards. We talked about the green transitions. We talked about competitiveness as well in the last session. And this openness is really a fundamental of our strategy for international cooperation in a changing world. We published the latest update of that last May. We called it the global approach to research and innovation. And this is really the openness that we see as important at European level. But the global approach strategy also brought forward an agenda of having a number of principles and values as the basis for this openness. And this is something which you heard about from our second speaker, the Deputy Head of Mission from France, who spoke about those quite eloquently. And we want these fundamental key principles, and to give you an example, we mean things like academic freedom, research ethics, integrity, gender equality, diversity, open science, and so on, to be agreed and implemented at an international level, so that we can create this kind of trusted space where researchers can work together across the globe and know that they don't have to focus on these principles. They can just focus on the research they want to do rather than how it's done and how it's put together, so they can work together in this safe space. We'll launch actually a multilateral dialogue with a range of non-European countries on this in the coming months. This follows up a conference that we had with all member states of the European Union in May of this year to prepare that multilateral dialogue. The outcomes of this will probably lead us to having an increasingly modulated approach on our cooperation with third countries. So our openness will become conditional. We will strengthen our dialogues with countries that agree on these values and principles and have greater openness in there, and maybe more selective in our openness to countries where we don't share these values and principles. And I think, underpinning all of this in the back of all of our minds, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has and will have a big impact on global cooperation. It's clearly an act of war. It constitutes a violation of international law. And it's also an attack on freedom, democracy, and self-determination, which are the fundamental values on which academic freedom and scientific cooperation are based. In the EU, as you heard in the last speeches, we've taken a strong action in this respect. We've suspended all of our current projects involving Russia. We've stopped funding from EU and member state programs to Russian public entities. And we're currently now in the process of actually terminating the involvement of Russian public entities in current projects. We've also decided not to engage in further cooperation projects with Russia and with Belarusian research organizations. We've also put in place a range of actions to support Ukraine and Ukrainian researchers. And today we just announced an additional support of 25 million euro through the Marie Skłodowska actions to allow researchers from Ukraine to continue their research in a member state or an associated country, and also then to support their re-establishment in Ukraine when we hopefully soon move to times of peace. There was also an additional €1 million for support for small-scale actions for Ukrainian researchers through the Human Frontier Science Programme. And we've encouraged all of our grantees, when they're looking for researchers, to take up postdoc and PhD positions, to actively reach out to the Ukrainian research diaspora to see if they can involve them in their grants. So that's just some food for thought to kind of set the scene for this discussion. It's really over to you now for your views. I'll start with the questions which I asked at the start of my talk, to see your views on this openness of international research cooperation. We'd like to hear your views on this issue. As I say, should all scientific research be unconditionally open? How should this change in times of crisis, or could change in terms of crisis or emergencies, be it global health emergencies like we saw through COVID, or times of conflict as we're seeing right now with the war in Ukraine? So I'd welcome your comments and your questions in that respect. If I could ask you that you maybe either raise your hand or I see there's only 7 of us in the session, so I'm happy for you to speak directly if that gets the conversation flowing. So really, over to you.
Let's go. So first I will introduce myself. So I am Sylvette Tourmente. I am the director of the CNRS office, which is the French National Center for Scientific Research. And okay, I'm very grateful to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to moderate a discussion on transatlantic research collaboration, needs and challenges with a CNRS perspective. So first, I will present you briefly the CNRS, and after that, 2 colleagues will talk about their international collaboration. So what is CNRS? The CNRS is the largest publicly funded research performing organization in the EU. As you can see on the slide, we are 32,000 people working at CNRS, and among them, 11,000 researchers and 13,000 support staff. The CNRS is as researchers in all the fields. So you see that we are working on biology, chemistry, environment, social sciences, engineering, mathematics, nuclear and particle physics, information science, and the Earth and the universe. And in fact, Each domain of research belongs to a scientific institute at CNRS, which coordinates and implements the scientific policy. On this slide, as it is written, you can read that the CNRS offers an internationalized research environment. And for the CNRS, like any research institution, the international is a priority, since interdisciplinarity and the international research are necessary to tackle scientific challenges. So first, the CNRS offers an internationalized research environment. And you can see on this slide that 17% of the permanent researchers, because we are permanent researchers at the CNRS, 17 working with CNRS are foreign citizens. And actually, 34% of newly recruited permanent researchers are foreign citizens. Second, to promote the international research, the CNRS has developed international partnering tools. And from the left to the right side of the slide, you have the different international tools that have been developed, from the less mature to the more mature tool. So the international emerging actions will promote, will help the new collaborations. The networks, international research networks, will strengthen a collaboration with several partners having a same domain of research, but from several countries. The international research projects that Naomi will present is also has the aim to strengthen the collaboration, and to get an IRP, the partners need to already have common publications. Then you have the international research laboratories, which are very mature collaboration with CNRS researchers who are affected in a US lab for long periods. And finally, a very new tool, international tool, international research centers. There are only two in, there are only two in the world at this moment. So one with the University of Arizona, and Joaquin will talk about this IRC, and the other one in London. So you see that international is very important. That's why we have developed tools for international collaborations. What are the needs? So to answer to the question which have been asked, what are the needs for a collaboration? So of course, collaboration needs to bring together excellent expertise. It needs also to bring complementarity, for example, at the levels of techniques or experimental conditions. For example, the University of Arizona offers environmental conditions like temperature, drought, vegetation that we do not have in France. And the international collaboration brings also together infrastructure or way of thinking. What are the challenges for collaboration? Of course, one challenge is to manage the cooperation, but also the competition that we have. And that's what we call co-petition. So the challenges is also that we need some added value for the cooperation. We have to respect the sovereignty of the countries. We need some reciprocity with the collaboration, common values. And of course, the international cooperation must take the geopolitical situation into account. Why do we have such institutionalized collaboration like IRN, IRP, and so on? I think it's important because it gives visibility of the cooperation, which will lead to support by the governance. I just wrote some CNRS priority. The CNRS priority is fundamental research at the service of society. We want to participate to some of the societal challenges like climate change, energetic transition, artificial intelligence, educational inequalities, health and environment, and territories of the futures. Of course, we are very concerned by sustainable development goals, and we want to have a multidisciplinary approach. So we will have two testimonies, one from Naomi, she will talk about an IRP, and after that, Joaquin, who is Vice President for Global Environmental Futures at the University of Arizona, will talk about the first IRC for the CNRS. And they will probably answer to some obvious questions like why an internal collaboration with CNRS, what is the added value, what could be the difficulties, and what this kind of international tool. So I stop there and then I give the floor to Naomi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just see if I can share my screen. Okay, so my name is Naomi Taylor, and I'm going to be speaking about an IRP, which Sylvette kindly introduced, between our group here in Washington and the group with Valerie Zimmerman in Montpellier. And I should say that I spent 22 years in France. I'm an example of a American European crossbreed, because I did all of my training here as an MD, and then went to France to continue my research and stayed on as a group leader in France in the INSERM, but in a CNRS institute. And in 2018 came back to the US after 20 plus years away, and we were able to establish an IRP to be able to continue some collaborations. And I think that you heard a lot in the first half hour that basically science can't be done without international cooperation. And I have to say that I've been really lucky to have been able to work with students and scientists from over 40 different countries in the world, from 6 continents, and that's really been a huge chance to be able to do this. And here is Valerie Zimmerman, who's leading the group in France. And as you can see here, even during the wonderful times of COVID with masks and everything, we still managed to have fun in the lab, to move forward. And I think, again, you know, the wonderful part of science is the issue of discovery. And I think we're all here to put a piece in a puzzle to try to solve problems that are concerning us, as we heard before, in terms of the environment, in terms of cancers, in terms of different issues. And being able to do this in an international manner is really fantastic. And I take advantage to thank the CNRS for putting these kinds of programs into place. So our group in France was really interested in metabolism and trying to understand how metabolism and how the utilization of nutrients can actually change what happens to hematopoietic stem cells and to cells that are going into different lineages. And what we were able to find actually was that the way in which a cell gets fuel doesn't just bring it ATP, but it also can control the fate of the cell. And we had a lot of work to show that if we actually inhibit the utilization of glutamine in a cell, we can change what happens to a cell, and they're no longer able to become red cells, but they're going towards a myeloid cell fate. And this actually has important consequences in terms of many diseases. The other thing that we've been working on for a long time is to understand if metabolite shifts will actually change what happens to T cells. And this is really important because T cells, when they actually respond to infection or where they respond to cancers, at the beginning of that response or at the end of that response, they're using nutrients in a different fashion. And so the question becomes does providing those nutrients in different ways, is the availability of those nutrients going to change what happens into a T cell? And the answer is yes. If we look at T cells, or what we call anti-cancer T cells, or Th1, if we get those T cells, we can actually be in a situation, especially in a cancer, where if we have low levels of glutamine, those T cells will not become anti-cancer T cells, but will become more suppressive T cells and will allow the tumor to grow. And this is just showing you a lot of work for how that happens. And then we can add in different metabolites. This is actually alpha ketoglutarate. And we can create a situation where we have more T cells that are developing. And so that brings us to a question of one of the reasons why I came to the NIH, to the NCI, and that is to really be able to bring these questions forward clinically. And so the group in France is doing a huge amount of really exciting work on how nutrients and how metabolites can be used to change T cell function. And in the NIH, we're actually using CAR T cells, or chimeric antigen receptor T cells, as new T cells that have been genetically engineered to be able to specifically respond to an antigen on a tumor or on a leukemia. And so this is actually some work that's been done collaboratively. It's really been led from Nirali Shah, who's the clinician who's been leading these clinical trials, and trying to understand how we can take information from clinical trials. And this is a real clinical trial. This is work that's going to be coming out in the review Blood in 2-3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. And looking at what happened to those CAR T cells, looking at differences depending on which CAR T cell we were using to see what happened in terms of the persistence of those cells, and then using that information and trying to go back and look at cytokines and to look at efficacy in mice models to try then to develop new clinical trials. And the new thing that we're doing now is to really bring in the context of the IRG to bring in the question of metabolism into that. And so there's really an exciting work that we're really setting up to do to be able to look at this in high throughput. And with the aid of the NIH and with the aid of the CNRS in terms of the ability to have international collaborations and to have an IRP, we've been able, and yes, COVID has been very difficult in terms of this, but we have been able to have a real exchange of students, of medical doctors who are working in the clinic, both here and in Montpellier, as well as senior scientists. Even with COVID, we've been able to do collaborative experiments, to hold joint meetings and interactions, and to bring this forward. And so this means having students who are able then to have a transatlantic experience, to be able to see different cultures. And I think that's as important for our American students here as it is for French and foreign students in France. In the group in France, at least half the group comes from countries outside of France, as you just heard from Sylvette, that 34% of new recruits come from outside of France. And I think this is really a wonderful way to do this. And yes, there is always bureaucracy that makes some of this more difficult, but it's really been an exciting time to start to be able to do this. And I will end there. And I think I'm a minute over, so I apologize.
Okay, well, let me briefly then talk about why this is such a powerful collaboration, what we're going to do, and why the importance of the collaboration. So I think the transatlantic collaborations are very important for the following reasons. One, and very powerful, is education. And one of the things we're doing with the CNRS is having joint PhD programs. And in the days where we're having these nationalistic uplifts everywhere and populist uprising everywhere, I think it's quite important that we educate folks that we're all sort of the same and that we all have views of what we would like our lives to be. So education is huge, it's hugely important to me. The second is solving problems. And Sylvette pointed out that there's an issue about competitiveness versus collaboration. But I see it very differently, at least in some fields, like the environmental field, where the real question is not whether we're going to be competitive in the end, but how do we solve the problems so that we can all survive in a proper way at the end. So we can forget in many of these collaborations the competitive part, and we can look at solving joint problems that will make humanity either worse or better. Of course, one of the key things about these collaborations is a diversity of thought. And you can always solve problems better if you approach these problems from different angles. And there is no question at all that the cultures that we grow up in sort of forge in our way of thinking how we approach problems. So even the scientific method, how you choose the problems that you're going to then use scientific methods to resolve are in some ways constrained or in some ways informed by culture. Diversity of assets when it comes to the environment is huge. So for example, one of the problems that we're going to have in the future is food production is going to be a big issue. And there's some assets that universities in the United States have because of historical context, where we have these things called experimental stations in the agricultural colleges. And these experimental stations go all the way from ranges, where you can study grasses and how they're going to be evolving in global climate change, to the microbiome of soils, to water use. So these assets don't exist in France necessarily. And certainly they don't exist in France, as Sylvette pointed out, in the environment that we have in the Southwest, which maybe you have a little bit in Provence, but it's certainly different. So joining assets of our countries, which you can't invent, they just happen to be, is huge. Some of them are invented. So we have, for example, the Biosphere 2 at the University of Arizona, and France has the ecotrons, and that collaboration is very, very powerful to try to understand, again, issues of the microbiome. Another thing that I think these partnerships allow us to do, if we manage these partnerships properly, is risk. And of course, as we all know, if you write a proposal to the National Science Foundation, you will have 20% chance at best, probably less than 10% chance of getting it funded. And that's because there's all kinds of mechanisms in our countries that are risk averse in the research that public funding pays. So I think that there should be more appetite for high risk, high impact research as we go through these kinds of collaborations. And I think that the international aspect of it should allow us to think about risks of funding in a different way. So those are the way that I think why these collaborations are very important. Now, in the case of this new collaboration, after a fantastic visit from the CNRS president and a group of folks from the CNRS, and that it included Mireille, in fact, yes, you were here. We came up after a few days of brainstorming that this particular collaboration, even though the IRCs are broad, and they will take into advantage the fact that we do quantum, the fact that we have very powerful space sciences, they'll be mostly focused on three aspects. One of them is carbon in cycles. The other one is water cycles. The other one is a school in agrivoltaics. And I can go into the details of what this means. But that represents to me the educational part of it, even though it's a technology that will address hunger around the world. the education of putting these things together brings opportunities that otherwise could not be had. And the last part that we decided we would tackle was future pandemics. Yeah, it sort of reminds me of the joke of this person that used to steal banks all the time, and they asked him why he kept stealing banks and not diversify. He says, well, that's where the money is. Well, the future pandemics are the thing, right? So we have to have something on future pandemics for sure. And all of these things are driven, no question about it, by artificial intelligence protocols, big data kind of things. So there's all those mechanisms that are supporting these 4 issues that I just mentioned, that I think will bring in the interdisciplinarity that Sylvette and others have been talking about. But what it does is there's been for many years a discussion of how important interdisciplinarity is. And of course it is, but if you make it work for you, then it shows immediately why it's important. So social issues that have to do with bringing technologies to Africa, we can't, without that, those technologies end up in a box that are not used, or using data to support all of these ideas. That's where all this interdisciplinarity comes through, and it's not just a statement without any reason. It really becomes quite important. And the last thing that I think is so powerful with the CNRS, and Sylvette, you should have pointed it out, is that it's not only the number of scientists that you have, but the spatial distribution of all of your centers that is so powerful. So you have collaborations all over the world already, in Africa, in South America. So you bring a diversity of geography that can be incredibly important in the kind of research that we're thinking about. So that brings an added value to any institution that is partnering with the CNRS. I think I'll stop there before I get kicked out and nobody can figure out how to get me back in. Thank you very much. And thank you, Sylvette, so much for inviting me to be part of this.
Thanks a lot, Joaquin and Noemi.